Howdy! So we're halfway through the year and it's time to talk about the movies that I watched through the months of April to June. I'm going to go through these in categories like I always do, starting off with the movies that I saw in cinemas. So the first movie that I saw in cinemas this quarter in the month of April was Civil War, which I think is one of the best I've seen this year and probably this decade of the 2020 so far. A lot of people had issues with this movie, like for instance that it didn't explain why the Civil War was taking place. I was absolutely fine with that. I don't really care why it was taking place because that wasn't really the point. And other people I think prejudged it before they even saw it, thinking that it was going to be very political, when in fact it's actually very apolitical, which is what a lot of people had an issue with. So it's like half the people didn't like that it was apolitical, half the people thought it looked very political and were against it, and it's just like only the people in the middle really, like myself, who actually watched it, loved it. Yeah, that's Civil War for you. Then next up, I watched Abigail, which is absolutely one of my favorite movies of this year as well. Fucking love it. Abigail is like a movie that's made for me. No, it's not quite as deep as Civil War or many other films. There isn't a lot to say here in terms of important themes or anything, but it's just like a fun roller coaster type of film, you know? Then I saw The Fall Guy. I saw this one with my parents. We had a good time. I don't think it's one of the best films I've ever seen in my life or anything, but it's up there for at least this quarter. Then I saw Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which I controversially have some issues with. I didn't love this. It didn't grab me emotionally quite as much as the previous Caesar trilogy. There was just something about it that felt like it was quite a bit of a step down compared to those movies to me, though I've heard everybody else seems to think other things and it's just as good, if not better. People fucking love this movie. I don't really get it. I thought it was kind of bad, if I'm being honest. I also had this huge issue with something that happened nearing the end. I'll try to skirt around the details, but the apes are trying to enter a structure, let's say. Apparently they've been trying for months and months to get into this place. And then eventually when they do get into the place, their answer to do that is basically to check the back. They go around to the other side and there's an opening. And it's like, you didn't think to look on the other side of this structure for months, apparently. Like, I thought the apes were supposed to be smart. What the fuck is this? Then next up, I saw The Strangers Chapter 1, which is another movie that I had quite a lot of issues with. I didn't hate it, but overall, it came off as very contrived. It was very short. There wasn't a lot of, like, time to give you to care about the characters, and even if there was, they were very one-note characters anyway. There was almost no personality to them at all. They were just your very safe, likable people, but so much so that it's just like, I want to vomit a little by how angelic they're trying to make these people look. Everything about them is like innocent and wonderful. They're the greatest fucking people to ever live, and it just made it so that it felt like the movie was being manipulative to me, and it turned me off of it. I didn't hate it, but I feel like there's a lot more to bitch about this movie than praise. I saw Furiosa. I saw this with my dad. We absolutely loved it. I love how this is a perfect prequel. It leads right into Mad Max Fury Road perfectly. It's good shit, man. George Miller, he really knows what he's doing. Then I saw Inside Out 2, saw this with my cousin, if that matters, if anyone's interested. And it's funny and cute, which kind of maybe goes without saying or whatever, but yeah, Pixar's kind of back, maybe? I don't know. Some of their recent movies haven't been quite as good as their like golden era or whatever throughout the 2000s, but they've made some good shit recently, and Inside Out 2 is definitely one of them. I do have some issues with this movie, such as the fact that they introduced new emotions, which I liked the concept of, but it made me call bullshit when it comes to like, what, Riley, the main character, didn't feel embarrassment before being, I don't know, 12 or 13 or whatever, however old she is in this movie. What? Come on. Yes, she did. You feel embarrassment as a child. Even if it's more of a basic level of it or whatever, you still have these emotions. But I did enjoy that they introduced anxiety into the mix, and it all felt kind of relatable and explained how your brain works in certain ways and stuff. I feel like this would be a good sort of useful tool to explain to kids how emotions and shit work. Then the latest movie that I've seen in cinemas for this quarter just yesterday was A Quiet Place Day 1, which I have sort of similar feelings as The Strangers Chapter 1, which is kind of funny because it's like, you know, A Quiet Place Day 1 and Strangers Chapter 1, you know. But yeah, I feel kind of similar in that I don't absolutely hate this thing. It comes from two previous films, which I like quite a bit, but this one just felt unnecessary to me, and there was something about it that really annoyed me, especially when it came to the fact that all of the people within the film sort of adapt immediately to the aliens and how to survive and all that stuff. They just know exactly what to do. So much so that, in fact, a like military helicopter flies on over and yells, "They can't swim, dickheads!" Basically, like essentially that's what they do, and it's like, cool. So we don't get to find out how they find that out. It's just convenient military helicopters yelling the useful information out to us. And look, I get it. It's probably not going to be this big epic story as to how they found out they can't swim. One of them fell in the water and they saw that it couldn't swim. I guess as far as that goes, you don't need that much of an explanation, but it just felt very dumb. And now we're up to the next category, which is 2020 2024 movies that I saw at home, starting off with the movie Lisa Frankenstein, which I wasn't crazy about. It didn't really feel like it was a movie made for me. It feels very similar to like the TV show Wednesday or any Tim Burton movie like, I don't know, Edward Scissorhands or that one, what's that one with... the one with Johnny Depp, as if that fucking narrows it down. You know, Dark Shadows or something about a like spooky family or whatever. Kind of how this felt. There was also an issue that I had with this movie where one of the main characters starts killing innocent people, and it's still supposed to be like looked at as like, oh, aren't they charming and quirky? But I'm like, they're killing people, but it's trying to be like a teenage romance comedy. I'm like, what are you doing here? It felt a little bit mixed up in that way. Then I also watched the movie Humane, which I was so fucking excited for. This is a Cronenberg movie, not David, not Brandon, Caitlin Cronenberg. It has a very interesting premise where they're starting to get on the brink of like climate change and like a potential apocalyptic event sort of thing. So they need to basically downsize humanity. And the government has basically commissioned this thing for people to execute themselves via volunteers. And it's very interesting when some people bail on their promised executions and a family of people basically have to decide who's going to take their place and who's going to die in this group. And that is such an interesting premise, but much like the original Purge film, it ends up being a movie with a fantastic premise of this great, like, universal sort of issue that's going on, but instead only focuses on one household taking place. And so it ends up just feeling a bit like a typical thriller movie within a house where people start turning on each other, more so than being like this grand scale, really interesting premise. And yes, the premise is still there and the movie's still very much about it, but it doesn't feel like it really reached its full potential, and it was a bit disappointing because of that, but I still did enjoy it. Then next up, I watched Turtles All the Way Down, which is a John Green book turned movie. He's the guy that wrote The Fault in Our Stars and I don't know, a few other things, like teenage rom-com-y type things, but they're always about characters who are like extra quirky and shit. And yeah, I like this one quite a lot. It is about a girl with OCD, and I found that very interesting to watch. Then I watched The Last Stop in Yuma County, which is a Jim Cummings movie, and it's basically about this cafe in like a very rural town that's very isolated being held up by two robbers, and basically the common folk who fall victim into this situation. It's a little bit comedic too though, so it's not quite as dark and horrific as a premise like that could be. And yeah, it's a hell of a lot of fun. It feels very Tarantino-y. I highly recommend this movie. It's one of my favorites from this year. Then I watched Godzilla X Kong Empire something something. That's literally what I wrote here. What was it? Frozen Empire? No, that's Ghostbusters. Something like that. Don't worry about it. It's the Godzilla Kong movie. It doesn't fucking matter. And it was dumb, obviously, but dumb in a way that didn't really capture me, to be honest. I thought it was going to be like, whoa, this is so fun, but instead it was like, whoa, I don't really care. I don't know, it was kind of boring. It's like, yeah, I get it. They're big CGI monsters and shit. I get it, you know? And then it's that for however long the movie goes for, you know? It's just like the gimmick is there during the first 10 minutes and maybe it's a bit of fun at that point, but then as it goes on, it's just like, it gets monotonous almost, you know? Like unbelievably so. So like, you're watching a giant monkey destroy buildings and shit, and somehow that gets boring, but it does, to me anyway. Then I watched Under Paris, that new shark movie on Netflix. I watched this with my parents. We had sort of a shark movie marathon this day. I'll get to those deeper with my rewatches, but I'll just quickly say they were Deep Blue Sea and Jaws that we also watched. But yeah, Under Paris is a hell of a lot of fun. I thought there was a good amount of like carnage in here, though it did get to the extent where it started being comedic as to how the film kept having to explain why people were constantly falling into water and all this kind of stuff. But there is a fantastic scene that's set within like the sewers of Paris where I don't even know how many people get killed and eaten and stuff, but it's incredible stuff. Yeah, the movie's silly, but it's also like high quality silly. It's not like Godzilla Kong to me in terms of, yeah, this is just like CGI soulless bullshit. Under Paris feels like it's something that people really put passion into, even if it is dumb and silly, you know, as a result, there's love there, if that makes sense. And I thought that it was well made, like given that. Then I watched Sting, which is that giant spider movie, and it was okay. Then I watched Boy Kills World, which is a movie that feels like it was made for me as well. It's got Bill Skarsgård in it, and basically he is pseudo Deadpool. This is a Deadpool movie, sort of, if we're being honest. In that, you know, it's very meta. He's talking to, you know, us, the audience, breaking the fourth wall and stuff, but he cannot actually audibly speak to the characters around him. He's like this mute character, so we hear his voiceover. It's very Deadpool-esque in that there's a lot of like crude humor, high levels of violence, and it's very like John Wick-esque in its action and stuff. It's fun, but it's not as good as I was expecting it to be, if I'm being honest. I don't know why, there was just something to it that didn't feel quite as inspired as similar films like John Wick or Nobody or whatnot. Then I watched Tarot, which is supposedly the worst fucking thing that has been released this year. The worst horror film, at least, according to a lot of people. People think it's so shit, but I'm gonna pull another Madam Web on you here and say, I didn't think it was that bad. No, it's not incredible. It's not fucking great at all, to be honest. It's just fine, is all. It's very average to me. I enjoyed it okay, I guess. No, I didn't really get like emotionally invested in it or anything. I wasn't on the edge of my seat worried for the characters, but it was very basic horror, you know, just horror stuff. It was fine. I don't know why everybody thought it was so horribly atrocious. Like, the worst thing I can say about it is that it's extremely generic, which it is. Then I watched You Can't Run Forever, which is a J.K. Simmons thriller about him basically going postal and, yeah, chasing after the main character and her family. And this movie's not very good, but J.K. Simmons is good in it, if that makes sense. Then I watched Movie Pass Movie Crush, which is a documentary about Movie Pass, something that we never had in Australia, so I wasn't sure if I cared all that much about it going in. It was somewhat interesting learning about the origins, but probably for that reason I didn't really care about it all that much. Then I watched Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2, which I love because the title rhymes, but I don't love because the movie's bad. And I feel bad saying this because I was a big advocate for the original film that everybody else hated. I was like, I didn't think it was that bad. It was kind of fun, actually. I liked it. This, though, the sequel takes itself way too seriously. It's like trying to actually make you care. And it's like, dude, you are Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2. I don't care. I don't like legitimately care, you know? Like, I'm not in this to feel things. And it just felt like the movie was like trying to be serious and trying to actually have you be invested, but it's just like, you're barking up the wrong tree here, dude. What are you doing? I don't know, man. I get it. Like, a lot of people are going to watch this and be like, oh yeah, it's going to be dumb fun. It's going to be a so bad it's so good kind of movie. But the director, Reese Wake Waterfield, that's not what his intentions are going in with this film. He thinks this is some sort of fucking masterpiece. I'm sorry to tell you, dude, that it's not. And look, this is a better film than I'll probably ever be able to make if I ever made one, which I'm not going to anyway. But if I did, I'm sure this is better than what I'd be able to make. Props to you. I didn't think it was horribly made or anything. I just thought it was kind of boring and shouldn't have been, given what it is, I guess. It's just that it was going for the wrong tone, in my opinion. It should have really leaned into the stupidity, which in some scenes it does, but in other scenes it's trying to get me to care about the Christopher Robin guy, and I'm like, I don't. Please stop wasting my time. What are we doing here? Then I saw The TV Glow, which apparently is a very popular film this year and people really love it. I think it wasn't exactly for me. I think I missed a lot about it. What I got out of it was basically, it was all about 90s nostalgia. I'm kind of sick of nostalgia movies, and it kind of felt like the characters were just like trying to be as weird and quirky as possible. At least the writers were trying to make the characters be that way. Apparently there is a huge allegory here for like trans people, which I missed for the most part, to be honest. And I feel kind of really dumb in saying that, to be honest. I think this movie went over my head. I don't think I quite knew what it was trying to do and what it was getting at. And I do feel kind of guilty. I was pretty excited to watch this as well, so it's not like I went into this like intending to hate watch it or something. I wanted to like it. I kind of missed the spot for me, but I think it's probably one I'm going to rewatch and try again with kind of the right expectations going in, you know? I knew that it was going to be kind of a weird movie. I was expecting it to be a bit more of a horror movie than it was, when really it's more just a coming of age movie. It's also got references to things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is a TV show I've never seen before, so it's not like I'm like enjoying the references, or they're not really references because it's a fictional show within the movie that's like apparently similar to Buffy. Anyway, the point is, I wasn't crazy about this movie. Then I watched Am I OK, which is a Dakota Johnson movie basically about her coming out as a 30-odd year old. old. And I thought this was like, all right. I didn't think it was the best thing ever or whatever, but it was a pretty like good basic average dramedy. It's sort of Judd Apatow-esque, but not quite as raunchy and rude or funny as those movies. So yeah, it's good, but I wouldn't rave about it or anything. But I do want to just take this spotlight here though to say that I'm sick of the Dakota Johnson slander. Okay, following Madam Web and following 50 Shades of Grey especially, everyone's been shitting on Dakota Johnson lately, and I'm like, why? I don't think that she's a bad actor, to be honest. You just haven't seen the movies that she's in where she's good. You've seen Bad Times at the El Royale? No? Then fuck you. Watch that, then see. Basically, I'm saying that I think a lot of people just hate on Dakota Johnson because she was in 50 Shades of Grey, and all the people that hate on her haven't even seen 50 Shades of Grey, maybe. I'm just guessing. This is totally anecdotal, but I'm just saying, like, I think a lot of people hate on her for the movies that she's in, that they haven't even seen, more so than they actually hate her. And maybe because she's a woman. Then there is a movie that I watched called Marmalade. This is a Netflix movie. It's got the guy from Stranger Things in it. You know, the guy with the hair, the pretty boy guy. The guy everybody likes. I'm not going to look up the name, fuck it. But yeah, Marmalade. This is like a crime comedy movie that I thought was okay and very confusing come the end. Now we're up to the next category, which is older movies. The first older movie that I watched was Molly and Max in the Future. That being said, this isn't a very old movie. It only came out, I believe, last year, possibly the year before, but anything prior to 2024 goes in this category. This movie is like on a shoestring budget, and it's incredible. I absolutely love it. It is hilarious. There is a lot here to love. It's very heavy on sort of sci-fi, but it also works its way around all that and all the silliness of the universe that it exists in to also be very relatable, because it feels like a movie that is all about being in your 20s and basically struggling through that. And it very much explores how people evolve and kind of go throughout their lives. It's a very personal film as well. Like, even though it's all set within like galaxies and there's aliens and shit and whatnot, it's very human. And I really appreciated that about this movie. There's a lot to love here. Then I watched Wonka, the Timothée Chalamet Wonka, which I thought was fucking weird. This was a confusing movie. Wonka is illiterate for one, which I just found hilarious. Why did they make him illiterate? I feel like that was such a just weird choice. Fine, but it's weird. There is a scene where the Oompa Loompa is there and he like farts and smoke comes out and it like goes into a transition of a flashback. And there's just some weird, terrible things in here. I don't think it's the worst movie ever or anything, but there's a lot in here that is cringe, and I'm not sure it quite nailed the tone that it was going for. I was sitting there, I was feeling secondhand embarrassment, if I'm being honest. A lot of other people apparently think this is a delightful film, and that's fine. I kind of get it, but it's also very just funny to me. Like, there are multiple scenes where the rival chocolatiers of this town try to execute Wonka. And yeah, it's just a funny movie in ways that I don't think was intended. Then I watched a movie called Fingernails, which is about sort of this like love test. It's sort of like a Black Mirror sci-fi episode movie about, this test that can sort of tell you how well matched you are with your partner or whoever you want through like DNA tests and stuff. And that sounds more interesting than the movie actually is. And it turns into sort of like this love triangle thing and stuff. And I wasn't really that interested in where it decided to go. Felt like it had a lot more potential than what it ended up being, unfortunately. But if for some reason they ever made a sequel, which they won't, I would be interested in seeing them give this another crack. Then I watched Lake Mungo, which is an Australian horror movie from like 2008, I want to say. This is one of the very early like found footage movies, basically. It's, Australia's Paranormal Activity, I will say, something like that. And I kind of hated it, if I'm being honest. I've heard that this is fantastic and extremely creepy. And look, to be fair, I was distracted doing other things and I watched this during the daytime. So maybe these were things that kind of took away from the experience. And I probably need to rewatch it again, given proper attention and respect. But I don't know. It didn't really interest me all that much, though. Then I watched The Hip Hop Witch! Oh, this is historic stuff, The Hip Hop Witch. Now I finally get to talk about it on my channel. Fantastic. The Hip Hop Witch is a movie from the year 2000 that technically stars Eminem, though not really. He's not in it very much, but he's sporadically thrown in throughout, and he is also plastered right on the cover there, apparently without his permission. So basically this is a horror movie, I guess, made by somebody who had some sort of incredible access to various rappers from the year 2000, though you get cameos here from people like Eminem, and I actually don't remember who else, and I wasn't familiar with a lot of them. Rap isn't really my genre or whatever, but basically you get a bunch of rappers in here, and clearly they are given the prompt to just talk about some sort of witch and what her curse is and what they're gonna do and how scared they are and stuff. And clearly it was just somebody with a camera shoving it into people's faces and saying, talk about a witch, and they just kind of make shit up on the spot. And that's what this movie is. It's just various clips of rappers talking about how the hip-hop witch is going to do various things to you. Eminem comes up with this bit about how the witch is going to put her fingernails up your butthole and stuff, so you better watch out from the hip-hop witch. I don't know, man. This is the worst movie that I've ever seen in my life. Literally, I think. I think it's worse than The Room. I think it's worse than whatever really bad movies are. This is so bad. It's incomprehensible. They try to sort of weave in a story here, but it's absolute nonsense. There's nothing here that you can grab onto. I don't fucking understand what the movie's really about, except for trying to be some sort of a horror movie about a witch of some sort. Like, they try to explain the myth of this witch, who never shows up on screen. And I only watched this because the Facebook group Cinematics, based off the podcast Cinematics, watched this. Everybody was kind of getting in on it. All my online friends within that group, we all sort of watched The Hip Hop Witch and discussed our various fucking experiences with this movie. It was a special time. We all got cursed by the witch, and I'm glad that it's over because I never want to watch this ever again in my life. Then I watched Blackberry, which is that movie about the Blackberry, the phone. And yeah, it's okay. I'm not quite as high on it as a lot of other people have been. Then I watched a movie called Don't Hang Up, which was very up my alley. This is just like a solid thriller about these prank callers who basically get their comeuppance. Then I watched a movie called Walk Away, which is about this group of friends who are staying in a cabin for the weekend or whatever, but then they find out that they're stuck in time and place and they can't leave. Every time they get to a certain distance away from the cabin that they're staying in, they just appear back in a room, and everything always sort of resets as well. They take something out of the fridge and then close the fridge. Everything that was there before they took that item out of the fridge is back, so they've got unlimited beers and stuff like that. And it's a horror movie as well, and it sounds more interesting than it is. This is quite bad. This is another movie with a shoestring budget, but that doesn't advance on that, if that makes any sense. It doesn't reach the heights above its own budget. It's just a pretty bad horror movie, unfortunately. Then I watched a movie called Nocturne. This is a Sydney Sweeney horror movie that's kind of similar to Whiplash in a way, because she's trying to be very good at music, piano in this case, but it's also a horror movie akin to something like Hereditary or whatever. But it's not nearly as good as either of those films. It's just it's a middle section between those two films, but it's also it's fine. Then I watched 12 Monkeys, the original, not the TV show, with Brad Pitt and Bruce Willis. This is a time travel movie, and it's good. It's pretty good. Then I watched The Blackening, which I thought was going to be very much for me. It probably wasn't quite that much for me because I'm white. Big bombshell secret for you there. So maybe I missed out on some of the humor and stuff, but for the most part, I thought that this was pretty enjoyable and pretty funny. I liked that it made fun of some of the tropes and everything. As a horror fan, it's an enjoyable watch. Then I watched a movie called Biosphere, which is a Sterling K. Brown and Mark Duplass film about the end of the world and these two guys who are living within this sort of sci-fi bunker. And basically it's about their relationship and something that they may have to do to sort of save the world. It sort of goes in I wouldn't say weird direction, just a direction that you might not expect it to go in. And I actually found it really interesting. If you're 12 years old, you might find this very funny or something like that. But I thought, I don't know, I thought it was kind of fascinating. And it sort of tackled the idea of gender roles. And that's all I'll say there. I'm trying to be vague. I don't want to spoil it, but I found it very interesting. I liked this movie quite a bit. Then I watched Wayne's World for the first time. Wayne's World, man, this is a movie I've heard over and over again about how funny and great it is. You know what? Wayne's World, dude, Wayne's World thinks that grown men falling over and screaming loudly and singing and stuff is the funniest thing ever. I don't know, maybe it's just like dated at this point or something, but there was just something very fucking irritating about Wayne's World to me for whatever reason. I didn't find it very funny, and I just like, I don't know. I don't like Mike Myers very much, to be honest. I find his humor to be quite cringe. I get that it's like over the top, in your face kind of stuff, and I can see where that might be funny in a certain space. Maybe with a group of friends or something, it could be funny. But when I'm watching it just by myself, I'm like, what is this shit? I don't know. Sorry guys, I know that there are people who are huge fans of this movie, but I fucking hated it. I also found this one scene very funny early on, and I mentioned this already on Middle Class Film Class, my friend Pete's podcast, when I was on that like a month ago or so. But there's a scene early on where they're like headbanging to like this music, right? And it's like, whoa, this is like hardcore rock, right? But it's Queen that they're listening to. It's like they're acting like it's like death metal or something, but it's fucking Queen. It's Bohemian Rhapsody. And I get it, that's still rock, I guess, but like, I don't know. It's just very funny that they were acting like this was the most hardcore shit ever, but it's like Queen. And I get it, I know, it came out in what, the 90s. Back then, things hadn't quite evolved to what we've got today regarding music and sort of the genre and mainstream getting harder. Yeah, there was just something funny about them acting like it was like death metal or something, but it was Queen. Then I watched a movie called Intruders. Basically, it's about this woman who is getting attacked by people, and she has this fear of not being able to go outside. She's like scared of leaving the house, basically, an extreme phobia. And basically, though, it's about her getting attacked by various people, but those people also finding themselves stuck in a certain situation that they didn't foresee either, and shit turns dark, and it's pretty brilliant, if I'm being honest. I will say it drags a bit, though. It's not quite as kind of fast-paced as I think it should be. It wastes a bit of time not just getting to the point with its premise, but the premise that it does have, and when it finally sort of delivers, it is very fun. I enjoyed this movie for the most part, but I wasn't super crazy about it. Then I watched Ruben's Solo Feedback Loop, which is a stand-up special by a guy named Ruben Solo, who is an Australian comedian. I watched this just on YouTube, and I've been on the record in saying that I think that this is the most creative stand-up special I've ever seen in my life. I think it's so brilliant and so funny. Then I watched a movie called The Cost, which is an Australian crime drama film about two brother-in-laws who kidnap the wife and sister's attacker, which happens prior to the events of this film, and they plan on getting revenge on this person, basically. And basically it's all about like what revenge costs, I guess. And yes, it's a little bit cliche, but it's well made and it's kind of fun to watch. An Australian movie set within like 40 minutes drive away from where I live. Then I watched a movie called No Man of God, which is an Elijah Wood movie about a CIA agent who kind of like interviews Ted Bundy over a various like number of weeks or months or something. And basically it's about him befriending Ted Bundy and sort of the complicated relationship that they have there and sort of the weird moral ground that this agent sort of stands within. It's like, can you be okay talking to this guy at all? Can you be okay befriending him in a way? They're not exactly friends. He knows that he's a monster and stuff, but they have this sort of kinship. Then I watched the original Planet of the Apes just before the new Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes came out, the 1968 version, and I thought that this was pretty brilliant. I love this movie, to be honest, which might surprise some people because I don't typically love older movies all that much, and I typically seem to go against the grain when it comes to classic films, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't know, it's not that good, what do you want? But no, Planet of the Apes, good shit. Then I watched The Last Voyage of the Demeter, the Dracula movie, and this was fun. I watched this with my mum though, and it was a lot more violent than I was expecting it to be. So basically she didn't see a lot of Dracula, if you know what I mean, and it was a little bit funny. Then I watched All Fun and Games. What's All Fun and Games? Horror movie on Netflix with Asa Butterfield, and it's bad. It's really bad. Then I watched The Help, the 2011 Emma Stone movie, The Help, which was pretty good. Then I watched a movie called Shut In, which is a very weird sort of example of a movie that got controversy because it was funded by the, what's it called? Daily Wire, which I'm not really that familiar with, but apparently it's Ben Shapiro's like news website or something, who's like this ultimate douchebag guy, if you don't know who that is. And so a lot of people are like super against this movie. And I sort of didn't really realize that it was funded by them and stuff when I went in to watch it. This is on Prime in Australia. And so I didn't really go into this expecting some sort of big political thing. And the movie itself isn't that political, I guess. It's just bad though. Like, there's just something about it that feels very unbelievable in terms of its bleakness. It's trying to be very like dark and grimy and gross and stuff. It's trying to make you feel bad sort of, but so much so that it doesn't really feel that believable to me. I don't know, there was something about it that just felt like it was a movie for dumb people, which I guess kind of makes sense actually. No, but it's like, I don't know, there's this one part where like, basically this is a movie about a woman who gets stuck in her like kitchen pantry, and while she is stuck within that pantry, there's this one scene where there's this guy who's friends with her ex-husband who happens to be in the house, and apparently he's like this convicted rapist pedophile guy, and she's trying to keep him away from her kids who are also in the house, and it's like, what am I watching right now? What is this? and basically the way that she gets him to not go upstairs to her kid is to offer him meth. And so she gives him meth, and like everybody's addicted to drugs in this movie and stuff. It just felt really stupid and gross. I just hated it so much. Yeah, nothing. I have no comment politically. I just thought it was a bad movie. Then I watched Derailed, which, given that title, I should have known was also a bad movie. This is about like a murder mystery train ride that people take, and it turns on them. It goes bad, and then the train crashes and there's a monster. The monster has about 20 seconds of screen time or something, and it's not great. Then I watched Dashcam, which is that found footage movie. This is another weirdly like political movie about a real life person who is like a controversial figure. I don't remember her name. I don't really care about who she is. And she's very annoying. I didn't hate this movie. I thought it went in some creative ways when it came to the violence and scare scenes in a found footage sort of storytelling device. But that being said, I'm not a huge fan of found footage, so it's only going to be as good as, you know, the best found footage movie. And for me, that's like 3.5 at most. I just kind of hate found footage movies, and this isn't one of the best. Then I watched a movie called The Dive, which is about two girls who go deep water diving, and one of them gets stuck under a rock and is rapidly running out of air, and the sister who basically has to try to save her. And yeah, it's okay. It's kind of like a not as good version of 47 Meters Down, and if you ask a lot of other people, 47 Meters Down is already not that good a version of 47 Meters Down. I like it, but yeah. So take that how you will, I suppose. Then I watched Morbius. Morbius. Morbius is, much like Madame Web, completely average. More cringe than Madame Web in my opinion, because it thinks it's cool. I don't know, Madame Web has this aura of who gives a shit around it, but Morbius feels like it's trying to be cool but is failing. I don't know, there's not a lot here to like. I kind of liked the villain only because he had sort of a good point. Morbius is like experimenting on this thing that's going to save them from their, I don't know what diseases they have, but they're going to die. They're on the brink of death, and he's experimenting on these things that where he accidentally makes himself Morbius, like a vampire dude or whatever, and the other guy wants in. He wants to be a vampire instead of just dying, and Morbius is like, no, you die. And I'm like, fuck that. It's just dumb. It's just a dumb movie. Then I watched a movie called Run, Sweetheart, Run, which is a movie that is sort of good. I don't know. It's about a woman who basically is going in on a work meeting that sort of turns into a date, but it turns out that the guy that she is meeting up with turns out to be this horrible person as she tries to escape from him as he stalks her throughout the streets of LA for the rest of the film. And with that, it's interesting. But, and I will say this because you sort of find this out early on, it's a supernatural horror movie, and the dude that's chasing her is like the devil or some shit. And it's like, really? I don't know if there was ever a movie premise that didn't need to go in that direction. It was this one. It just felt like it already had something going for it, and then they added something else that it didn't need, and it just complicated it. It just made the whole thing messy, and it just made it sort of dumb to me. I don't know. I didn't like that it was like this supernatural thing. I did, though, find this one scene in particular very funny in this movie where she arrives at like a friend's house, basically. There's this group of people who are watching a movie, and they're like, hey, you want to come watch this movie with us? And what they show on the TV, what they're watching is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original film. And the scene that is taking place on screen is where the protagonist is in the truck driving away from Leatherface, which is the last scene of the film. I just found it hilarious that like this movie's setting up like, hey, do you want to come watch this movie with us? But it's the last fucking scene, man. Were we not supposed to know that? It's a pretty classic known movie and scene. I just thought it was funny. What an empty promise. Then next up, we're up to the next category, which are rewatches. Clown, which is an early John Watts film, who is the guy who made the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. But this is like this very different movie compared to those. It is an indie horror movie about a guy who puts on a haunted clown costume and cannot take it off. And basically it's like it's stuck to his face and body and stuff in grotesque ways. He tries to get it off. It goes from there. It's a very violent, disturbing film, and it's not as good as I remembered, to be honest, but you know, I still appreciate it for what it is. Then I watched Spider-Man, the original OG, what's it called? Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man. But it's kind of a cheat because I watched this with the Pretty Much It YouTube channel commentary as they talked over the film. So I don't know if that counts, but I wrote it down here. I put it on Letterboxd as well. So yeah, it counts. Shut up. Then I also watched Spider-Man 2 and 3. Spider-Man 2 is one of the best movies ever. It's so perfect. Spider-Man 3 is not one of the best movies ever, unfortunately, but it's not as bad as people make it out to be. Then I watched Red Eye, which is the Wes Craven movie from 2005 about Rachel McAdams getting taken hostage by Cillian Murphy on a plane, and it's good. It's good shit. Then I watched Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and War for the Planet of the Apes, which are all bangers. Then I watched Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That was for Middle Class Film Class, the podcast that I guested on about a month ago. Then I watched The Strangers and The Strangers Prey at Night, which the sequel is brilliant in every single way, and I urge everybody to watch that if you haven't seen it. I know what you're thinking. The Purge? The Purge? You're not thinking The Purge. Nobody was talking about The Purge. The Strangers Prey at Night. Who wants to see that shit? This shitty sequel of an already shitty horror movie, you're probably thinking? But no, fuck you. Sorry. The Strangers is already brilliant, but The Strangers Prey at Night? Oh, it's fantastic. It's incredible in every single way. If you're not convinced, watch the pool scene. Look it up on YouTube and watch just the pool scene. It's the best. The best scene you'll see today. Guaranteed. Then I watched Jigsaw, the Saw movie, Saw 8, Jigsaw, just because I felt like watching a Saw film, but I didn't feel like binging the entire series. And Jigsaw is one of the ones I'd seen least. So I'm like, let's just watch Jigsaw out of the blue. But that made me want to watch the original Saw, but then I didn't watch any of the other Saws this time. I only watched those two at the moment. And that is for a good reason. It's because I think I want to make individual reviews of each of the Saw movies. So I only watched the first Saw, and I'm planning on writing a video about it at some point. I think I'm going to have to rewatch it again because that was a while ago now. Then I watched Mad Max Fury Road. This was the day after I watched Furiosa with my dad. So we then both went on to watch Fury Road together. Fury Road is maybe just an inch better than Furiosa, but they're both pretty fantastic. Then I rewatched Civil War with my mum to show her that movie, which she thought was good. Then we didn't watch. I watched Terrifier 2. I rewatched Terrifier 2, which is honestly, it's chef's kiss of modern horror movies. It's also very fucked up. Oh my god, that scene where he kills the woman like in the bedroom, you know, and then he starts putting salt on the wounds and stuff and peeling her skin off and everything, and she's still screaming. It is absolutely fucked. Like, oh my god, I was worried somebody was going to walk in on me watching this and like think I was some sort of sadistic fuck. The rest of the movie though is pretty fun. I particularly love the costume shop scene. Then I watched Terminator 2, which is one of those movies where when you rewatch Terminator 2, you remember as it's going on like, oh my god, right, this is the best. This is the best fucking thing ever. Now, I am one of those freaks that actually prefers Terminator 1 more than 2, but I only watched 2 this time. It's just the movie I felt like watching that day. And, you know, I can't say a bad thing about 2 either, even if I do like the original a little bit more. Then I also watched Terminator Genisys, which is probably the most unpopular of the franchise, though it's honestly probably my third favorite after the first 2, maybe? I don't know. 3's okay. Salvation? I don't even really remember that well. I fucking hated Dark Fate. I kind of don't mind Genisys. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the first 2, but it's probably my third favorite. I'm sorry. I know that's probably a crazy thing to say. Then I rewatched Scream 5 and 6, which are both good, but seem so pointless at this point now. Now that Melissa Barrera is out of this franchise, after we have, sort of built up her character as being Billy Loomis's daughter, and she's maybe going on this path to becoming the next Ghostface or whatever. Apparently not. Now she's not going to be in any of them, and I don't know. Now Nev Campbell's coming back. Spyglass got all desperate and they're like, hey, we'll give you a bunch of money. Come back, please, 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 please. So now she's coming back and it's going to be about Sydney again. We were finally kind of getting out of what all the Scream movies kept being about. And now they're crawling back in, But that's okay because, I love Sydney and Gale Weathers and stuff, so it's fine. I'm fine with them coming back. Now we're up to June, still rewatches. First I watched Phone Booth, which is a pretty solid thriller for the early 2000s, but it is also very dated because people don't use phone booths and it's a little bit funny in that way. I also looked up Colin Farrell's age while I was watching this, and he was younger than me within this, and I'm like, fuck. That's all. I was just like, fuck, really? There's just something about when you look back on an actor who you know is older than you, but watch stuff from when they were younger than you, that still feels like they're older than you. You know what I mean? Like, seeing them there, it's like, clearly that's like this grown man and who knows more than me, who's wise, who's older than me. But it's like, nah, he was actually a couple years younger. Fuck. Next up, I watched The Silence of the Lambs, which is a bona fide classic, but it is a bit of a weird movie. If you're not familiar with it and like you don't know Hannibal and you just watch this as a movie, it's the only thing you've ever seen from this like world, the Thomas Harris like sort of world. It's very strange when it comes to how it deals with Hannibal, right? Because he's barely in it. And I knew that, and this is a rewatch, but it's like the whole movie is about Clarice, going after Buffalo Bill, but every so often we get glimpses of Hannibal and what he's doing and like biting cops and escaping. And then the end of the movie is him having escaped, right? But like, who's Hannibal at this point? Why would you care all that much? He was barely in the movie. He's like this weird side character going off on his own side quest as the main characters all do their own thing. It's a little bit weird to me. I don't know. Maybe it only works as a sequel or something where you already know who Hannibal is. I guess Hannibal is a famous enough character though that doesn't matter so much now. But I don't know. It is a little bit weird if you don't know Hannibal. Does that make any sense? Then I rewatched Deep Blue Sea and Jaws with my parents in a shark marathon. Deep Blue Sea is my favorite shark movie of all time. LL Cool J is my favorite shark movie character guy of all time. He's fantastic in this movie. The scene where he gets stuck inconveniently in an oven that is burning while water is all coming through as well. He's like gonna drown or cook to death or both at the same time. He somehow gets out of that and blows the shark up. It's incredible stuff. I absolutely love it. He's also very funny in this movie. I love it. It's such a good movie. Then I watched Jaws, which is my mum's favorite shark movie, and everybody else's favorite shark movie. And I watched it and I enjoyed it the most that I've ever enjoyed it during this rewatch. I was like, all right, I kind of get it, especially during this third act, which is very like intense and very well made. And I enjoy it. Jaws is inarguably a very good movie. It's no Deep Blue Sea though. And I mean that. That's the sad thing. I actually mean that. Then I watched Halloween 2018, the David Gordon Green Halloween 2018 movie. That's okay. Then I watched Split. Then I watched Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which to this day, it's as good as I remembered. I was so nervous during the first like 20 minutes or so. There's a scene where there's like a simulated blowjob where it looks like another character's doing that to them, and a passerby sees like misunderstanding what's going on, and I'm like, is this not as good as I remembered? But once the plot really starts to kick in, yes, it is. Ignore the first 20 minutes or so. This movie is so fucking funny, especially as a horror fan. If you don't know what it is, it's basically these creepy hillbillies who look like they're the typical sort of, cannibal, creepy, inbred hillbillies of a horror movie who are going to kill all the like teenagers within the film. But instead, they actually happen to be very polite, innocent people who are just doing nothing. But there's a series of misunderstandings misunderstandings so that it makes it look like they are killing various people. And the whole movie is just like trying to make them look creepy in unintended ways. And it's absolutely hilarious. Then I watched The Descent, which is the movie about cave-dwelling women and vampire monster type thingies taking them down. With that being said, given that premise, I think this movie wastes its time monumentally when the monster thingies, vampires or whatever they are, don't show up till an hour into this hour and 40-minute movie. I just feel like that's such a waste of time to not have what the movie's about happen for, 2/3 of the movie. What are you doing? What are you doing? I don't know. I don't mean to sound like an impatient child or something, but there's just something frustrating about it. It just like it takes its sweet ass time getting to the point, and too long, in fact, if you ask me. I also have a huge problem with this movie. I guess it's a spoiler, but it's a 2006-5 movie, so I'm just gonna spoil it here, okay? Whatever. Basically, the movie ends with the main character killing her best friend so that she can escape the monsters, right? And it's not like this good big sacrifice that the friend makes in order to redeem herself or something. No, the friend just murders her. Why? Because this other girl led them to a cave and told them it was a different cave, which did endanger them. Even if there weren't monsters, it still is pretty dangerous to go in this cave that like nobody's been to before, and so they don't really know where they're going and all this kind of stuff. So that's pretty bad. She also cheated with the other woman's husband, the main character's husband, which is a shitty thing to do. Not a death warrant though. Not worthy of a death sentence. And basically we watch the main character just fucking kill her, and we're supposed to be like, yes, you go girl. I'm like, fuck that. Sarah, the main character, she's the villain of this movie. Fuck her. But yeah, it was okay. It's an okay movie. I'm not as crazy about it as other people are. Like, this is considered a horror classic to a lot of people. I don't quite see that. I think that it's good during like the third act, I guess. Before that, could get to the point quicker, in my opinion. Then I rewatched Bullet Train with my parents. Then I watched They Came Together, which is basically Tucker and Dale versus Evil, but for rom-coms instead of horror. It's brilliant. It's so funny. Then I rewatched I Love You Man. Then The Stanford Prison Experiment, which is the most interesting movie that you may ever see in your entire life if you haven't seen it. It is about a real-life experiment that took place where all these like college students volunteered to go to, and they were randomly assigned a role of being either a guard or a prisoner. And basically it's all about the power dynamics that just naturally fall into place when people are given certain powers and responsibilities and all that kind of stuff. Very interesting. Then I rewatched Pineapple Express, which is funny. The movie, I mean, but it's also funny that I watched it because I'm like known for being a person who like, I don't like drugs. I don't know why I have to say that like I'm like letting you down or something, but like I'm known to be a person who's like, I don't know, I'm not a drug person, you know? I don't really judge anybody who does take drugs or whatever. That's fine, that's your business, but I just don't like drugs, right? So when you go into watching Pineapple Express, right, you're probably expecting like it's gonna be these people being like, drugs, and that's gonna be the whole bit. But really it's about how much of a loser these guys are and how they're inequipped to deal with this crime action movie plot that they get stuck in, you know? And I find that very funny, and so I enjoy this movie. Then I rewatched Game Night, which is one of the best comedies ever, if you ask me. Then I rewatched The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I think are great. I know that a lot of people hate 2, a lot of people are indifferent to 1. I think they're both great. I like 2 more than 1. I don't know. Andrew Garfield is great. Then we're up to TV shows now. First, I watched the Fallout TV show. That's my favorite video game series of all time. I've got the little Vault Boy thing there, so I was very excited for this. I made a review of it when it came out. It's good. It's great. Then I rewatched some of BoJack Horseman. Haven't quite finished it yet. Then I watched Sons of Anarchy. Only season 1 so far. I haven't watched it in a while though, and I might have fallen off of it now, but I watched the first season. It was okay, but I wasn't crazy about it. Then I watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine. This is a rewatch. I'm still getting through it. I'm also still getting through Supernatural, which I've continued from where I left off last time. I've tried to rewatch, just get through this series in general numerous times, but I always fall off somewhere. I've started at season 11 this time, and I'm getting through it, but very slowly. Then I am also rewatching Dexter now, and that has really overtaken all of the other shows that I'm watching. I'm now up to season 6 of Dexter already, and I only started like a couple weeks ago or something. Yeah, Dexter. I fucking love Dexter so much. You know this if you know know my channel, but yeah, Dexter's one of my favorite shows of all time by far. But unfortunately, I'm up to season 6 at the moment, and that is just the worst season in my opinion. I think it's even worse than season 8 and 7. I don't know, there's just something about it, like, because it's all about like religion and stuff, and I'm not really into that theme, and I don't know, this just, I don't know, season 6 I think is kind of weaker than the others. I also have rewatched Hamish and Andy Euro Gap Year. This is an Australian comedy duo who were famous for their radio show in the early 2000s. They still do their podcast now, I believe. I don't really listen to it though. But I loved these guys growing up. They were like my introduction to sort of, I don't know, like kind of edgy humor, I guess. Not really. They're very like politically correct TV friendly, but in an edgy way, if that makes any sense. They never really cross any boundaries or anything, but like as a kid, it felt like they were edgy, I guess, is what I'm saying. They were like Jackass Light or something as they challenged each other to do things and whatnot. And they had this series of travel shows from like 2010 to 2014 or so. And yeah, so I watched the one where they go to Europe. I have just started the other day watching the one where they also went to Asia. I think I'm going to watch all of them. I really love Hamish and Andy. The Hamish Blake in particular is very funny. Andy's kind of the straight man. If you're Australian, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, you don't. But if you have never heard of these guys, I would recommend it. Their Gap Year series, they're fun. They just go to places and do dumb stuff. That doesn't sound good when you say it like that. That just sounds shit, but it is good. Whatever. I'm getting tired. How long is this? I've been recording for 1:20 now. I'm just sick of describing things. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about some drawings that I've done within the past couple months as well. And so I'll just pop them up on screen. So first up was this Mr. Burns one that I did here. And so there's only 5 that I did the past couple months, but 5 drawings and 3 of 5 are Simpsons ones, and the other one of them is Futurama. I always draw Simpsons shit. That's just kind of my style nowadays. But yeah, with this Mr. Burns one, I tried to get really intricate within like the background and details and stuff. That's not really something that I've ever done before all that much, but I'm starting to get into it just this year. Yeah, so this was like a pretty big project actually, given that background. It took quite a number of hours. Then I did this Deadpool one, which I'm pretty proud of. Like, I don't know, there's something about it that looks really good to me. And I put up like this comparison thing because I had happened to draw Deadpool in a very similar pose like exactly 10 years ago, and then I drew it again, and it's just like leaps and bounds better. Like my improvement is like inspiring. I'm the king of drawing. No, but like I'm really proud of it though. Like there's been a lot of practice, a lot of time in between those, 2 drawings, and I fell off on drawing for a number of years. Pretty much when I started YouTube, I had slowly started to draw less and less and less, and just this year, or within this like last year, within this last 12 months, I've started to really get back into drawing, and I'm excited about it. So yeah, there's this Deadpool one, and then there's this other one that I actually drew for my friend Pete Abeda. I mentioned him earlier, the Middle Class Film Class host. It was his birthday, so I decided to draw the Lighthouse movie in the Simpsons style, because he's also a big Simpsons fan. So yeah, that's what that is. And since the movie is in black and white, I thought I'd keep the characters in black and white, but I wanted to do like add some color, and I feel like the background with the black and white, I don't know, it like pops, Gab and Chatter, just by the way, is their like, that's one of their segments of the podcast where it's basically just like movie news and talking shit basically about movies and stuff. But it's also a quote from the movie The Lighthouse where he says, "Now's the time for Gab and Chatter." So that's what that is. Then I drew this Simpsons again drawing of Santa's Little Helper and Snowball 2. I kind of fucked this one up a little bit because Snowball 2 is bigger than Santa's Little Helper, and so that's, the proportion is a little bit fucked, but that's okay. It's not really that big of a deal. You probably wouldn't have noticed if I didn't point it out, but I did. And also, if you can tell, like the corners there are supposed to be the TV screen. We're supposed to be looking in on it from the Simpsons TV screen as they look back at us. That's kind of what I was trying to go for there. But yeah, I like the look of this one just because, I don't know, there's something funny about Santa's Little Helper looking all freaked out and the sort of indifference of Snowball. I feel like, yeah, I was pretty proud of this one. And then finally, I tried my hand at digital art for the first time in a long time, and the first time that I've really tried it really properly like this. I had drawn this Futurama one on paper and started coloring it, but I didn't really like how it was looking. I had started coloring in Leela and it was too dark, and I'm like, fuck, I kind of screwed this up. So I thought I would try it digitally, and yeah, I'm really proud of this. I think it looks kind of phenomenal, to be honest. I might have overdone it with like the highlights and stuff. I know it's a bit busy, and I also know that it's a little bit annoying with maybe some of the characters over each other. Like, I know Fry's face is sort of entirely covered by Zoidberg there, and maybe that's not the best look. The truth is, I drew this on paper originally, and I ran out of room. It was just a logistical issue. That's all it really was. It was also not planning ahead, because I drew Professor originally, and I hadn't planned on drawing all these other characters. I was only going to draw the Professor, and then I just sort of kept adding to it. I'm like, fuck it, let's make this like a Futurama mural or whatever. So it turned into this with all the characters over each other, but I like the look of it. They're like crowded, and it's sort of cool. Anyway, yeah, so those are the drawings and stuff. I don't know, I just thought I'd try something a bit different. I've been drawing a bit more and people like them, so I thought I would show them. Why not? And so those are all the movies I watched, all the things I drew, and that's that. That's that quarter of the year covered. Finally, after like an hour and a half of recording, I'm fucking dumzo. God, I'm so sick of recording at this point. I shouldn't complain. You're watching this. Thank you if you are. That's all that I gotta say for now, though. Before you go, please do the things which are like, comment, share, subscribe, all that shit. And I'm Maddie. Goodbye.